Hey folks, Dr. Shawn Baker here. Let's talk a little bit about obesity today. This is a topic which has a lot of controversy around it. It's not really one of my favorite topics. I prefer to talk about actual disease mitigation, but obesity is a very important topic and it's very common. According to the World Health Organization, there are about 650 million people throughout the world who are suffering with obesity, and that number surely is going to go up as it has in the past. Now, what we often hear is, hey, it's just about moving more and eating less, and that's all you got to do. Lose weight. And as most of you know, that sort of advice has not worked for many people. Whether it's true or not is a different story, but the advice to just do that is leaving a lot of things behind. And we're going to talk about some of those other potential issues and some of the other things we have to consider when it comes to weight loss. Stick around for the end. I'll kind of give what I think is a balanced synopsis of this information. Okay, back to that claim, calories in, calories out. Obesity is all about just consuming more calories than you burn. Now, there is certainly some truth to that, and quite a bit of truth to that, but it is much more complicated than that. And so when we think about things that contribute to excess weight gain or the accumulation of fat or obesity or however you want to phrase it, there are many things that go into it. And what you eat has a big role here. What you eat, when you eat, how much you eat, your hunger levels, your level of insulin resistance, blood sugar levels, your mitochondrial health, sex hormones can impact this. How much do you move? What type of exercise do you do? Do you do cardio? Do you lift weights? How much sleep do you get? How much sunlight do you get? Do you have an autoimmune disease? Do you have a gut disease? What kind of medications or supplements might you be taking? Do you have underlying inflammation? Are you addicted to sugar or alcohol or other drugs? Any other chronic stressors in your life? All of these things will have an impact on whether you gain weight or not. Okay, the next sort of thought is you can just actually go become a marathon runner. You can lose all that weight. And while it is true, exercise does burn calories, and exercise can contribute to some degree of weight loss, but honestly, it has a very minimal impact on that for many people. Now, exercise is incredibly beneficial to us, and I have been a huge proponent of exercising, but the problem is you can only realistically exercise a small portion of the day. Most of the day is spent either sleeping or in non-exercise activity, and therefore exercise can only impact overall weight loss by a small amount. Now, is it better to exercise and not exercise? Yes. Now, your body will adapt to exercise. As you first go out and you start, let's say you go pick up jogging or something like that, or even lifting weights, at first you're very inefficient. You're inefficient mechanically, you're inefficient from a neurological standpoint, and your body, as you get better and better at these things, the exercise becomes easier, and therefore it becomes less effective at calorie burning, if that's what you're doing it for. So remember, our body will strive to become more efficient at things, and therefore over time, half an hour of running, which may have had more benefit in the beginning because you're very inefficient in your technique and you burn more, becomes less effective, 6 months later. So there's something to consider. All right, and so the bottom line with that is, basically it's very difficult, or even some say would impossible, to out-exercise a bad diet. And I guess it depends on how bad your bad diet is. Some people just eat constantly are eating garbage and junk food. Not only is their diet awful, but they often will not feel like exercising because they'll be so sore, inflamed, and maybe enough obesity where it becomes very challenging to exercise anyway. The next one is, if you just ate less, you would clearly lose weight. Well, easier said than done. Now, we know that many quote-unquote foods, and I'll put quotes there because I don't really consider them food, but all this ultra-processed food that we have on the market that is designed to be hedonistically pleasurable, it is designed to be hyper-palatable, is very challenging to eat less of. You can go back to the old Lay's potato chip, bet you can't eat just one. Well, that's because very few people can eat just one. And it is very easy to overconsume those foods. In fact, they're made to be and marketed to be overconsumed. And so just by thinking I'm just going to eat, one potato chip or just one little bite of chocolate, is kind of a poor strategy in most cases. And in fact, rather than eating less of those foods, if you frame it from the philosophy of that I should be eating more foods that are healthy, more whole natural foods that are going to provide me plenty of nutrition, rather than empty satiety on top of empty hormones. And so beef, eggs, cheeses, other types of meat, seafood, and some whole plant foods can provide a level of satiety. Whereas these other ultra-processed foods, remember, Americans eat about 65% of their calories coming from these ultra-processed foods, and that probably, as much as anything else, is why we are such a fat nation. Okay, the next thing is, obese people are, they just don't have any willpower. They're lazy inherently, and, they just don't want to do anything. Well, willpower can have a role there, but more importantly, I think, again, it comes down to the type of foods you're eating. If you're eating foods that are rich in sugar and refined grains and synthetic oils and things like that, those things are very challenging to give up. They're very addictive. They are clearly things that people struggle with day in and day out. And again, it is, I don't have a lot of willpower, to be honest. And I don't have to rely on that because I eat a diet that is, basically all meat. So I don't really need as much willpower as somebody else might have. So really, I think the argument about who has the greatest willpower, for the most part, you put any human being in a situation where they're hungry long enough and they eventually will eat whatever's in front of them. A lot of these people that are obese, that are chronically consuming foods that are of low nutritional value, are hungry constantly because they're never really, reaching nutritional satiety to a sense that they're actually full. They're always looking for their next meal. As they're finishing one meal, they're thinking about when's the next meal going to be and what am I going to eat for that meal? And so that's a constant struggle. Okay, the next one is, if you're over a certain age, let's just for arbitrary purposes, say 50 years of age, if you're obese, you're going to be that way the rest of your life. And while that often is the case, a lot of people will, get to a point that they stay obese their whole life and they never change. It is certainly a myth that you can't, change your life, lose excess weight. That certainly clearly happens, and just about for anyone can do that. And so you can start with just some small things. I like to tell people to start avoiding sedentary behavior. You don't have to go out and start a gym and start exercising like a maniac on day one to start losing weight, but just get away from the sedentary behaviors. I think those things, remember, most of our waking hours are spent either being sedentary or not being sedentary, and that is a choice. And so, as you guys probably notice, anybody spend a lot of time, I'm always standing up. I rarely am sitting down outside of using the restroom and maybe sitting down to eat, but most of the day I'm up and about. I'm moving around. I'm trying to be active. That is a simple behavior. Many of us work office jobs. Many of us spend a lot of time in front of computers. Just figure out a way where you can stand up. If you can't get a standing desk, pile some boxes and put your computer on top of that and just stand there. And try to do that, even if it's just 1 hour a day to start with. You can start with that, and then you can move from there. Start lifting, eventually as you feel better, lift weights. Now, I think that exercise is tremendously beneficial. A lot of people that are obese, chronically inflamed, it is really, really uncomfortable and painful and not enjoyable for them to do that. Exercise should be something you enjoy. And if you can't enjoy it because everything hurts, then focus on diet first. Start removing all these inflammatory, ultra-processed foods from the diet, the sugars, the grains, arguably the oils. I think you'll see that you start to feel better. As you feel better, start taking advantage of that time. Okay, here's another interesting claim that obesity is genetic. In fact, there are people out there that saying that there's nothing you can do. You can have the best diet in the world and exercise. If you have genetics to predispose you to obesity, you're always going to be obese. That, again, is, in my view, there's a lot of problems with that. 100 years ago, we had largely the same genetics. Genetics have not changed significantly to any degree over the last, really tens of thousands of years. Very minimal shifts in genetics. And so the explosion in the number of people that we have obese, 42% in America right now, is not down to obesity. Now, what you might see is that some people, when exposed to an awful food environment, will put on more weight than others will, and there's certainly some truth to that, but it's not the genes that have changed, or they're not the genes that necessarily make us obese. It is chronic exposure to absolute garbage food. That is undeniably it. You can couple that with some of it with sedentary behavior, but genetics do not determine whether you're obese or not. Your environment, what you do, has a huge role there. And the people that are saying it's all about genetics, basically take and these people often have a drug to sell you. Well, it's not your fault. Here, take our drug, $1,300 a month for the rest of your life, right? So I think that is something we should really, really look at skeptically. Okay, some people will tell you, oh my God, you're eating fat. You're like, if you get a steak with some fat on it, that's clearly going to cause you to become obese. Because we know that fat is calorically dense, 9 calories per gram, whereas protein and carbohydrates roughly 4 calories per gram. So if you're eating a lot of fat, you're automatically going to become fat. Well, that also is not true. Fat is not inherently fattening. Overconsumption of these things, yes, that arguably is. What happens is, in a lot of cases, having adequate fat in your diet, and I do believe you can overeat fat, but having adequate fat in your diet, i.e. a piece of meat with enough fat on it to provide flavor and satiety, will not inherently make you fat. In many cases, it'll be so satiating and satisfying that you'll decrease the amount of food you eat. You'll not want to eat the garbage food out there, and therefore having adequate fat in your diet is actually a net positive. And the fat that comes with meat is generally provides a lot of essential things we need, fat-soluble vitamins. Meat itself is just full of nutrition. You know, there are over 50,000 individual nutrients in beef. Now, most of them, we don't even know what they do yet, right? But of the ones we know what they do, many of them provide tremendous, tremendous benefits to our body. Now, remember, you can't just pick out, oh, it's got saturated fat in it, and therefore it's bad. Remember, there are multiple types of saturated fats: stearic acid, oleic acid, palmitic acid, short-chain fatty acids, on and on and on. And so to say, oh, just because there's saturated fat in it is bad for you. Remember, meat is a whole food with thousands and thousands of wonderful nutrients that have an overall effect. Okay, so meat is not inherently fattening. I have yet to meet a person that, you know, became obese from just eating meat. Okay, so in summary, and you know, there is some nuance to this. Calories do count. They do matter. You know, if you just exercise and move more, yes, you'll lose weight. However, and this is a big caveat to that, most people find that that doesn't work for them. That strategy does not work for them because they have to literally, they have to change the food. And I think the biggest thing you can do to no longer be obese is eat food that you're actually designed to eat. When you feel better, you get out there, you start doing the things that are going to make you healthier in general. Okay, hopefully this has been helpful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the notification bell. Let me know in the comments if this has been helpful and what other things you'd like to hear about.